All right. So today we're going over how to complete the startup process, more specifically, how to do the startup checklist because you will be, if you're the study lead for a brand new study, you'll be responsible for making sure that all our T's are crossed and I's are dotted in order for us to prepare to see the first patient. So on the second slide, we start with the introduction. So the study startup process can take a few weeks and it involves various people at and outside of the site. So that means not only us and our operations team and schedulers, but also obviously on the study team's end, people that represent the sponsor, negotiating contracts, and regulatory. They send us startup packets, which have our agreements, 1572s, financial disclosures, and things like that. And also, the study team and vendors will also be sending supplies, training, systems access, so EDC, IWRS, to set up all of that before we see our first patient. And then the site staff is involved, as in the coordinators and the site managers, in creating the source documents, organizing the study, and preparing to screen the first patient. So, the way we track our upcoming studies, if you've ever wondered, is this upcoming studies tracker, which I'm going to click on. So this is a big tracker that we use on the management team. It has every study, as in the full protocol number, the description of the study, who is going to be the PI for that study, the site manager involved, who's the designated study lead, and then the awarded column tells you whether or not we got the study yet. So pretty much as soon as this turns yes in green, we start on the study startup process. So after we have our PSV for selected, essentially we need to hit the ground running for getting our affairs in order. So this gives you a slight idea of what's coming at Delrict at all the sites. So I would encourage you, even if you're not involved with the startup process at any moment, to review this tracker, and it'll help you, kind of see where we're going with the sites. Sometimes you're wondering, like, how many more studies are we getting? Well, here's your answer. So with this study tracker, we're able to, again, see the protocol and our site number, and that's going to help with source creation, so you know what to put in the header. So generally, once we've been awarded the study and the contract has been signed, we're notified by the regulatory team, and right now it's going to be Reggie Mister. And what he does is create our study folders and our startup checklist. So we have a template for our study folders organization, and we also have a template for the startup checklist. So once he creates that and names it into whatever study is starting, he notifies the study lead and the site manager. That way you know that the folders are created and we need to start working on the process. So for this startup checklist, it's a Google Sheet spreadsheet that outlines the areas which need to be addressed in order for us to prepare for our first patient visit. So each task is grouped by type, and it's assigned to a different member of our team. So ultimately, the study lead is responsible for making sure that this tracker is up to date and all the tasks are assigned and completed on time. And everything, as you know, needs to be on the drive. If you created even a checklist for how to turn off the EKG machine at the end of the day, that has to be on the drive. So even though the startup checklist is kept up with and monitored by the study lead, that study lead is not responsible for completing all the items by themselves. It's a lot of work and it takes a lot of coordination to make this work. It's just that you're the point person for making sure that it gets done on time. So a few examples of the task owners for this process are the study lead, the regulatory coordinator, the advertising team, CTMS and website team, and the site manager, of course. So for the startup checklist, you'll see a lot of colors, as all our trackers look like. So here's the color legend. So it serves to guide you. That way you know that the process is, clear. Just by looking at it, you can see how much green there is, how much, stuff is done. And the blue tasks are communication tasks. And what that means is you're going to hand off that item to someone else. So let's say, add the study to the website. If that's a blue task, you need to tell our team member on the website team to add the study to the website. So it's a good way for you to know what is your job and what is assigned to someone else. The yellow tasks are specific information for that study that needs to be filled in. So protocol number is going to be yellow because you need to fill that out for that specific study. And same for the EDC. So is it RAVE or is it data labs? You would fill that in. And then green is when a task is complete. So very similar to our action items, you would fill in the cell for whatever task has been done to indicate that it's completed, and there will be initial dates, and I'll show you that soon. And each individual task should be separated. So try not to group items. So don't say EDC system access and training in one line. So try to separate it out into its components so we know what parts are missing. And just as a disclaimer, again, the startup checklist is a template that we created. So feel free to add tasks and items to that checklist. So it's 100% allowed and encouraged. So your study lead is going to know more about the study than the rest of us. So if you know that we need specific systems that aren't on there, you can go ahead and add them. For example, if the template says we need EDC, IBRS, and maybe an eDiary portal, but you also know that that study requires an EKG portal and a questionnaires portal, you can add those systems as well. And the study lead will also be the person to add documents they know we'll need. So if, we have our standard medical history, inclusion, exclusion, etc., but they know that we need an additional agreement that the patient has to sign and date, then we need to add that to the list of things to create. And they need to update the supplies list. We'll go over these individually. So if you see a task on this template that's not applicable to your study, do not delete the cell. So what we suggest is that you just use a strike through so we know that that's not applicable to that study. So things are not disappearing, so we don't think you're just taking things off because you don't want to do them. I know it seems silly, but I've seen it. So again, let's say your study doesn't have a diary and there's a space for diary on the supplies checklist, you can go ahead and strike through it. So as I mentioned earlier, the startup checklist is divided into different sections, and we'll go through them one by one. The first one we'll go through is the drive folders. So this task is owned by the regulatory contact. As I said earlier, they're supposed to create the folder, and the study folder is maintained within the site folder on the drive. So if you'll go to your drive, the site, so you'll put Audubon Derm, and then you'll put Dermira. So this is where the template patient tracker will be saved as well. And again, the tracker needs to be personalized by the study lead. So everything is a template. You need to tailor it to that specific study. And the subfolders in the drive for each study are standardized across all the sites in the company. So we'll click on this link so you can see an example. Just give mine a second to load. That's really taking a while. Oh, there we go. All right, so here I'm in my drive, and then I went to urgent care. So within the study folder, you can click any study, and you should be able to see the different subfolders that get created. So that includes ICF and EKG, SIV, sorry, not ICF, but labs, regulatory, and here you see the patient tracker is housed in here. So all these folders are standardized. We have a template folder that we create for each study. So we expect minimal changes. We actually do not want you to be creating new folders. And if you feel like one is truly necessary that doesn't fall into any of these categories, let your site manager know so we can figure out how to organize or whether it might just, be able to fit under a different folder that already exists. Alrighty. So the source documents folder is also created by the regulatory contact once we get the study rolling. So this one is located under Drive Source Docs. You select the site that you're willing to see the source docs for, and then the study. So we're going to do another example for those of you that haven't been through this process before. So in the source docs folder, this is where you'll see more variation between studies. They don't all have, like 3 visits, they might have 20 or more phone calls or special forms that you have to create. So for those, you can make folders as needed. And as soon as my screen loads, I'll show. Not sure what's going on. I'll keep going. All right. All right, so here we are. So I'm in source docs, and then you would click on the study file, and then you select any study to get source docs for. Okay, so next slide. So the IRB is another tab or section of the startup checklist. So once we have IRB approval, that usually indicates that we should start seeing patients soon. So that's when they give us our approved ICF, so we can start making our summaries. And typically that means that the study team is about to greenlight us or tell us the official notice that you can start screening at your site. So the regulatory contact will also make sure that the study lead and site manager have access to the IRB portal. And that's important because you will receive notifications of any posted materials. That might be advertising they have, brochures that they have approved for that specific study, or maybe electronic versions of the diaries, things like that. It's very important to keep up with that, especially for changes to the consent. You would be notified directly. So on this section, the study lead does not really have to do anything. You just maintain communication with the regulatory contact so that you can mark the task as complete in case they forget. So to prepare for recruitment, there are a few steps involved. So the study team creates the script, as in more like the study lead. So that must be done prior to kickoff. So the kickoff meeting is where you really explain that study to the schedulers so they can appropriately identify patients on the phone to bring on site to screen. So all the scripts are on the drive in the scheduling folder and study scripts. All coordinators or members of the site should have access to this folder. So if you do not, let your manager know so they can grant you access. So the lead can use any of the created scripts for recent studies as examples. And I say as for recent studies because our older scripts maybe are not as updated in format or style as our current ones are. So once the script is created, the lead must let the scheduling and advertising team know that it's created. And then we have our study kickoff meeting. So the template, I linked it here for you to review on your own. But the study kickoff meeting has a lot of different components and information that would be useful to teach somebody that doesn't know the protocol about the study. And this meeting, we really want to be done about 2 weeks before we expect to start seeing patients. That way we can work out any kinks, go through the script together, see if there's a better way to present information to potential patients over the phone. And the following tasks should also be completed prior to that kickoff meeting. That's the study information sheet, the reminder call scripts, and both of these are on the startup checklist, and there are links to these documents on the startup checklist as well. And these are master documents, they're not protocol specific, so you'll have to make a new tab or a new section for your study. So for the CTMS and website section, Mara and Melissa will be your contacts for this right now. So the study lead doesn't, again, really need to do anything besides just checking in to make sure that the tasks are complete. So I hope you're kind of seeing a pattern here. You don't have to do something on every single section of this checklist. You just really need to be responsible in following up with the people to whom you're assigning tasks. So they create the study in CTMS, and what that means is, that's how you're able to do the visit management and select visits, schedule, cancel, etc. And they usually actually do this right after the study is awarded, so it might already be done by the time this startup checklist is created. You just need to confirm with them and then turn it green. And the finalized screening script is uploaded to CTMS after the study lead, site manager, and the scheduling team all agree that the script is good enough to use to start recruiting patients. So they upload it into CTMS so they can directly screen patients there and schedule them from the system. And then they update the website. Let's say it's a new indication, like like a foot ulcer, and we don't have that on our website yet. They did go ahead and add that. That way, if people click on our website, they can see all the opportunities that we currently have available. So again, a little more regulatory information. So the regulatory coordinator will take care of tracking any important documents that have been completed, printed, and filed. So they would make sure that, for example, that 1572 I mentioned, everyone's training and GCP and CVs are all on the drive and also in the regulatory binder. So again, this is one of those tasks where the study lead doesn't really have to do anything. They just follow up to make sure it's done. So it's really not that much work if you think about it. And the regulatory coordinator will also keep track of any logs that will need to be updated throughout the study, and they'll review that with the study lead. So that needs to be a joint effort because the regulatory coordinator is going to alert you of you have a screening and enrollment log that has to be updated every single time you see a patient. So you need to be aware of these things, and because of it, we create a cheat sheet checklist. That way you're able to know exactly what kinds of logs you have to keep up with throughout the trial. And we have a link here for an example. We're going to look at it. So this one's pretty short. This study only had about 4 logs: the training log, delegation log, there was an IP master log, and a pre-screen log. So these are important things to know if you're the study owner. That way you can make sure that as you're prepping for your IMVs or any other type of monitoring visits or audits, that you have reviewed all these logs. And the site manager also uses these for their portion of chart review as far as regulatory quality assurance. And then with the ECRF guidelines, that is not always provided by the study team. It's nice when they have these. That way you can create your source documents accurately. But that's not something that the regulatory coordinator would have access to. Typically, they'll just send that to the coordinator at the site. So if you do receive the EDC guidelines, go ahead and put them on the drive. This would be the study lead's responsibility. So you'd go to Drive, the site folder, the study, and then there's a folder called EDC guidelines. From there, the regulatory coordinator would make sure that these guidelines are printed and filed because it's a requirement if they're provided for it to be in the regulatory binder. So the monitors will be looking for that. So you're all familiar with the concept of logins. We all have a lot of different logins to keep up with. And right at the beginning, the study lead is the person really identifying what kinds of systems we need and any training required for those systems. So you would track down what everyone needs, not just the coordinators, but also the PI, as far as exactly what systems are involved. And then you'd make sure that any access request forms are completed and submitted to the study team for anyone who needs access. So you can coordinate with the site manager and refer to tasks delegated on the delegation log. So for example, if we have a sub-I, typically we don't delegate them the task for EDC because we haven't had sub-Is that are very involved in the studies. It's different with Kelly Quinn, NP. She's a little more involved. So you talk to your site manager to see who should you request EDC access for, who should you request IWRS access for, and eDiary, etc. All those portals are not always going to be granted to everyone, especially with the sub-Is and PIs, we have to be careful because then we'd have to keep up with their accounts and it just can easily become inefficient. So after you identify the systems and people complete their trainings, you're making sure that all of these are saved properly. So you would go to the drive, training certs, system, and the study. So we have a new system for saving all our certifications. So you would save the file as system underscore the first initial of your first name and your full last name. So for example, here, if I had a rave certificate, I'd save it as rave underscore C Imetuche. And that all goes in the training certs folder, and that's on the drive. So each system might be used by multiple studies, so you'll click on exactly which study you're saving that certificate for. And for all items on the checklist for startup, you're only highlighting the cell once once all the components are complete. So just in that same regard, you're only highlighting the cell green once everyone's training and access has been completed. So let's say I received my access to Rave, but I didn't do my training yet. That cell should still be blank, even if I'm the only person on the team that hasn't gotten their access. All right, and then you'll be updating the checklist with the name of each system after the colon. So it'll say EDC colon, you need to put Rave or Data Labs, IVRS colon, you need to put the name of that system. That way too, we all know what to look out for in our emails when we start getting those access emails. Okay. And for IARB, only the study lead, PI, and site manager will need access to that. So that's not something you need to be looking out for all your team members. And the site manager will track the PI and sub-I logins. So you're responsible for requesting access and making sure everyone's on the list, but you don't have to track down their passwords and usernames and such. Right. So now we're going to move to the document creation portion of the startup checklist. So the study lead is to assign document creation to other members of the team as appropriate. So again, you're not responsible for making every single document yourself. And the lead is also not responsible for, well, you are responsible for coordinating to make sure all the documents needed are created. So although you don't have to make all the cheat sheets, you have to know that we do need those and somebody has to be assigned them. So again, you're going to work with your site manager to decide who should do what parts of this and what the due dates should be. So that may include cheat sheets, checklists, summaries, and logs that are not, visit 1 source document, visit 3 source document. And for study startup purposes, we only need to have created all documents and ancillary sheets for the first visit through randomization. So if it's a visit that if it's a study where they're randomized at the second visit, you only need source, cheat sheets, etc. for visits 1 and 2. If it's a third visit randomization, you would need source for visits 1, 2, and 3. Just to give you an idea that, you don't have to have all 12 visits for the study created, just through randomization. But if you do get it all done because you started early and you were super efficient, that's awesome. We'll take it and you're just ahead of the game and you won't have to be turning in 1 source a week until you're done. So apart from all the documents you need to create for the visit, there are also some support documents that the lead should make sure are done. So for example, a study summary, which is like a 1-page document that explains what the study consists of. And I have an example here we can click on now. So this is an example of a study summary. It really should not be extensive. This is not a replica of the protocol, just nice and sweet, short and sweet. How many visits, what's the reimbursement like, what are the chances of getting drug versus placebo, main inclusion exclusion criteria, and a little bit information about the IP. So for some background, we often provide these summaries to a PI or sub-I that's participating on the study because they're not going to read all 111 pages of the protocol. So this should really cover most of the information you need. So similarly, we have the ICF summary, which is the informed consent form summary. So this should be a few pages paraphrasing key aspects of the informed consent. So I have an example pulled up here. It'll have the title, the purpose of the study, and you really should cover all the key items you will communicate to the patient. That way you don't have to read all 20 pages of the consent in order to fully inform that patient. And again, this really should not really exceed maybe about 3 pages max, 4 is pushing it. And definitely there are requirements for what it should include, but we do have training on that separately. But if you have questions, talk to your site manager and they'll be able to help you. All right, so a couple other documents we need. We have the lab processing cheat sheets, and these give you step-by-step instructions broken down per visit to guide coordinators on how to process and package the labs. And that's from start to finish. So from you actually drawing the blood all the way to how you package the labs, where you get the airway bills from, putting the stickers on, and who to call to get a pickup. Is it online? Do you have to call a special number, etc.? So again, I have another example here to give you an idea of what you should involve. So as you can see here on this cheat sheet, it tells you what protocol it's for and what visit. So visit 1 for this study, there are about 6 tubes that you have to collect, and it tells you exactly what to do with them after you draw the blood. And same with the urine samples and how to do the slides, fill out the paperwork for shipping, and how to package the labs and ship them off. And the idea is all of these are going to make life much easier for showing someone how to deal with these studies, and rather than have them figure it out from scratch every time. And once we receive IP or investigational product, we have these IP receipt checklists to give you step-by-step instructions on how to check it in. So once we get the drug, we don't just let it sit in the box or just throw it in the drug room. There's a formal process by which you have to go online and acknowledge the shipment so that the sponsor is aware that we have the drug on site. And sometimes you have to send the box that it came in or the cooler back to them. So this checklist would tell whoever is receiving drug exactly how to fully follow the process. So every moment from opening the box all the way to packaging it, putting it in the IP room, and checking it in on our master logs where we say how many bottles we got, what the bottle number was, when it expires, etc. And that's something that you can also receive training for at your site individually. But somebody has to create this once we get drug. So again, we have a couple other documents we may encounter. So a blinding plan is rare, it's not always needed. But if it is needed, the study lead will be informed by the site manager. So they'll work together to fill it out. And that's more with our studies that have maybe an unblinded personnel that can know what treatment arm the patient is in, and then everybody else is blinded. We have a couple studies that are like that. So I have an example here if you're interested in looking at that. But that's not something that you would be doing independently. Typically, a site manager is completing this. You would just be working with them to make sure it's done. And the PI responsibility summary is also created by the site manager, and it outlines what's required for the PI for the study. So let's say it's a diabetes study that requires titration at every visit if their blood glucose is above a certain number. So it would have those kinds of details on there. That way the PI or sub-I knows what to look out for. And again, not all studies may have one of these, but it is nice to have for new PIs or sub-Is that are joining our team. All right, so now with study materials, these are when you really know you're approaching your first visit. The study team starts sending you boxes and boxes of, labs or ancillary supplies, patient materials, water bottles, what have you. So as we're getting all of this, the study lead has to keep track of this. It's very important that we know exactly what we get from studies and what's needed. So this section of the checklist also has to be personalized for the study. So if the study doesn't have diaries, strike through that cell. If they have glucometers and it's not on the list, you need to insert a cell. So check in with your manager to make sure that the checklist for the study is complete. They might know something else that you don't, so it's good to always touch base. So based on what you know from the protocol and what you may have learned at the PSV or SIV, you might have a clearer idea of what supplies are needed. So let's say the protocol doesn't say that the site needs to buy urine pregnancy tests, but at the SIV they said that the lab is not providing them and we have to purchase them. That needs to be on our list because we have to make sure we allot for that and inform Tyler and Rachel and Morrow. That way we can order those pregnancy tests on time. And that's just an example of that. So do not leave any supplies off that we have to purchase ourselves, or any supplies off in general, whether or not they're provided by the study team. There's nothing too small. So even down to like lancets for patients to use with their glucometers, you need to include that on the list. And you have to log initial supplies on the spreadsheet when they arrive. So to fill out the supply checklist, we have this spreadsheet. It might look different at your site if you're not at urgent care, but for the urgent care site, it looks like this. And this is another Google Sheets spreadsheet, and there's a template tab that you can copy over and rename for your study. So you would list exactly what item it is, so be very specific. Frozen shippers or ambient shippers, and then we'll decide on a low alert. So we'll say when we get to 5, this needs to be reordered. So you would update this for all your supplies, checking with your manager to determine what the low alert should be. And then your last inventory date, if it's your initial shipment, it would be the date that we got the first shipment for that study. And you would log how many of every piece of equipment or drug kits that we received. And then on these pinkish lines, we document details about how to get the supplies. So we have a filled out example link on the next line. And it's the same spreadsheet, it's just a completed one. So you can have an idea of what the final product should look like. I'll let that load. But again, just to reiterate, all supplies must be here, including all shippers, Saturday stickers for FedEx, etc. So not all supplies will have a form to complete. So some labs require a form to reorder supplies. So if it's one of those, you need to put a link for how to get those supplies and a link for where the form is on the drive. I think we're almost in business here, just letting this load for a little bit. All right, so as you see on this example, the 419 study for Theracos, we have all the supplies we have and the last inventory date, which this looks like it needs to be updated. And then there'll be links for using the forms and how you order. So some supplies you order directly through your monitor. Some supplies you have to call a special number or email a special email address to get the supplies through. So you really have to, analyze all your initial supplies and talk to your site manager and figure that out before it's time to order more. All right. And then finally, for first visit preparation, the study lead will work with the site manager to make sure that a full mock visit is scheduled. So due dates for all items are going to be assigned around the target mock visit date. So let's say you're the study lead and we're seeing someone on the 20th. We need to have a full walkthrough at least 2 days prior to that first screening. Ideally, more than that. So regardless, your entire startup checklist should be completed by 1 week prior to the first scheduled patient visit. So everything should be green on that full checklist, and we should be able to know with certainty that we have the supplies we need. If a patient walked in tomorrow, we could see them. We should never have a delay due to our own unpreparedness. That's not acceptable, and that's not the standard that we want. So the mock visit will include how to perform all the procedures, how to use all the equipment, how to dispense IP and ancillary supplies. So as you can see, it's important that we know that we have everything that we need, because we wouldn't be able to have a quality mock visit if all these items are not completed. And yes, that means you're going to pretend to have a patient, pretend to consent them, use the source, see what's confusing about the source, if anything. Like, oh, medical history was supposed to include questions about, postpartum depression, and we don't have that on our source. So we're really using this as a review and a full assessment of our preparation for screening. All right. So we're going to go through some details, and then we'll run through the training checklist for startup so you can all see what it looks like. So the person completing a task must initial and date in the appropriate column. And the notes column can be used for stating who's been assigned a task or has received access to a system. And also you can use the notes column for making comments, noting updates regarding a task. So if you know that 3 people on your team got their EDC access, but you can't turn it green yet because 2 people are pending, you can go ahead and type, Carrie is pending, Janet is pending, something like that in the notes column. So that's for you to use at your discretion. That way you know what's going on with that checklist. And also the directions and examples column, it contains links and tips for completing a task. So not all tasks will have anything written in the column. So as a task is completed, you can replace the text in that column or add text to that column with the actual link to the document you made. So if you're done with the script and you want to link it there so everybody can review it when we do the mock or whatever it is, then you can use that accordingly. So all yellow cells must be updated with the study-specific info. I said that earlier, but just be on the lookout for that. Things like IP temperature, you'll see it's study-specific, so you'll need to add that there. And also be a great training tool for your team. That way they can quickly go here and see what's done for that study, and then what information they need to know about, how to receive IP, how to store it, etc. All right. So now we'll put it all together. I'm going to pull up the training startup checklist, and we'll type in some information in real time just so you get an idea of what it looks like. And just a disclaimer, this checklist should not be used for a study. It's for training purposes only, and we'll fill it out as a tutorial. And the spreadsheet will be cleared out, and it can be used for training other employees in the future. So it's not for a real study. Okay, so as you can see, this is the startup checklist in its glory. So everything yellow needs to be updated for specific protocol information. And everything here on the left panel is blank right now. There are no colors in the task column because nothing is completed as it stands. At least that's what this indicates. Remember, all the blue items are going to be communication tasks. So for example, the regulatory contact will alert the site manager and the study lead that the study folders have been created, source docs and study folder. So that's how you know that you need to hand off something to a different team member. So let's do an example. Let's say we were expected to see our first patient on July 12th, 2018. And this is updated by the site manager, the expected start. And again, it can shift based on what's going on the study team's end. And let's say it was protocol direct -2018-001. So you would put that there. Oops. You also want the sponsor here. So we'll put sponsor is direct. The protocol is DR 2018-001. And then I'm looking for all my yellows. So IRB, let's say the IRB is Nexus. We'll use a real one. And more yellows. So my sub-I is going to be Tyler Hastings. And then the coordinators on that study will be Chi, Mauro, Ariel. Why not? All right. So far, we've hit all our yellows. Oh, there goes one. So IP temperature, let's say it's an ambient medication, so 15 Celsius to 30 Celsius. All right. So those are the obvious yellows. There's a couple of unspoken yellows, and I say unspoken because they may or may not apply to all studies. So we just have a space here for them to be filled in. For example, EDC, IWRS, IRB, Central Lab, eDiary, EKG, Study Portal, Safety Portal. So all of those, once you identify them, you can go ahead and turn them yellow yourself. That way you know, like, I need to specify what systems these are. I need to know for myself. And then let's say that this study also requires an endoscopy and there's a portal for it. So this is one of those situations where you would personalize it. So I'm going to add endoscopy portal. And let's say that there are no EKGs in this study. So I'm going to strike through the EKG portal. Notice I didn't delete it. And then since I added a line, this isn't merged anymore. So just the tiny little nitpicky formatting, we're going to merge that so it's all grouped together with this section. So we're going to start filling out this information. We'll say RAVE is the EDC, ALMAC is the IVRS, the IRB again is Connexus, Central Lab can be Q squared, eDiary Portal ERT, Study Portal can be, I don't know, it's like different letters. Safety, not all studies might have one, but endpoint is, we'll just put endpoint, which is also an IVRS, but there's also some safety. And then endoscopy portal, we'll just pretend, just put something down. All right, so that's how you would fill that out. So, for example, like, not all systems have a specific training for it that give you a training certificate. For example, for ALMAC or any IVRS system, you might just get access and there's no required training. So if there's no training required, you can just strike that through on the training line. And then if there is training for it and everybody's completed it, this is where you fill it in green. So we'll say that everyone here has gotten training for their eDiary portal. The EKG portal doesn't apply, and that's it. But here you notice there's a task here for making sure that everyone's login sheet is created. So if you're the study lead, I suggest that you create your logins first and then have everybody go and copy yours. That way they all have the same systems and it's full. It's a complete list because you created it and you know what they are. So again, with the initial and dating, once a task is complete, the person who completed it needs to initial and date when they did it. So we'll do this, and this is green. So it's pretty easy from here. It's kind of treated like your action items. You fill in cells that are completed and initial date to show that. And then here, if you had any notes or comments, you can make them here. Like, let's say, patient tracker still needs to be personalized. Something like that. Like if you have anything to say about that task, that way when you're going through this with your site manager, because you will have regular check-ins about your progress, you can tell them, with certainty, like, oh yeah, I didn't do that part because, I was missing 2 other people's certifications or the website wasn't working, what have you. Use this to really truly keep tabs on every aspect of your startup process. And then directions examples does not have to be used. It's just kind of at your discretion. So if it doesn't apply, you can just ignore it, put in A. You can black it out if that bothers you to just be blank. But that's essentially it. Again, all of this, we expect all this all these tasks to be complete in green by 1 week before you see your first patient. That way we can make sure we're 100% ready to screen. We have no doubts about it. And yeah, that about covers it. Thank you.